Hello there, Year 9. This is your next lesson to do with diseases. Today we're going to look at vaccination and how this can protect against disease. You've probably heard quite a lot about vaccination recently, if you have been following the news, because the search for a vaccine against coronavirus is one of the biggest jobs going on within the scientific community at this time. Welcome to 9 Geem and 9 Faraday, who will also be working from this video this week. Now, first thing you've got here is a do now task. There are 3 sets of information, one for physics, one from chemistry, one from biology. They are all true or false questions. Decide whether each statement is true or false. The answer is on the next slide. Of course, you're watching this at home, you downloaded it. You can pause your video while you write your answers. And here are the answers. Work is measured in joules. True. All cells contain DNA in a nucleus. False. Red blood cells don't have a nucleus. They have lots more room for hemoglobin to carry oxygen. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus, but they do have DNA in a loop. Lithium, potassium and cesium are all in group 1. That is true. The first 2 questions were from your knowledge organisers, which you should have with you at home. If 9 Geem and 9 Faraday members don't have them, let me know and I will email you a copy. Now, our objectives today are to know how your immune system works, know how vaccination will protect you against a disease. You have got some key vocabulary: pathogen, antigen, antibody, vaccination. These 4 words are going to be used a lot. The 2 you need to be very careful of, fairly obviously, are antigen and antibody. They are very similar in how they look. You need to read them carefully to make sure you've got them the right way around, and you need to make sure that if you are at all confused, you make an effort to learn them. Now, the first thing we've got is a short video. There is a link here in blue to the YouTube. If you have downloaded this video, you can freeze it. You can copy and paste that link to run the other video in a different window. You are going to need to watch the video twice. First time, probably just watch it. It's only 2.5 minutes. Get an idea of what's going on. Second time, I've given you 5 statements below. You need to put them in order. I would suggest that you write out the statements first, then you actually just put a number next to them and then you put them into order. So you've got 5 things to listen out for in the video and to find out what order they went. The answer is on the next slide, so you will be able to check your answers. If you get it wrong, I suggest you watch the video again and try and work out why you weren't quite so sure on what happened. So here are the events in order. First of all, Jenna wanted a cure for smallpox. You could change this today to many people want a cure for coronavirus. The difference between smallpox and coronavirus is smallpox killed pretty much everybody that caught it. Jenna noticed that milkmaids who'd caught cowpox did not catch the smallpox. They're similar diseases, but not the same. Cowpox was not fatal, but it was just unpleasant. So Jenna decided he'd deliberately infect James Phipps with the cowpox. James Phipps was the son of his gardener. He was a young boy, and he chose a young person because he would not already have come in contact with smallpox or cowpox, so he knew that both the infections would be new to his body. 6 weeks after infecting him with cowpox, he deliberately infected James with smallpox. This must have been very scary because, as we've already said, smallpox is pretty much deadly. But amazingly, James Phipps did not develop smallpox. Now, if you looked at the video, you will have got the rough idea of the dates when this happened. The smallpox vaccine was then developed and it was used widely. But it wasn't until the middle of the previous century, in the 1900s, that smallpox was actually eradicated from the whole world. It took a long time for that vaccine to work, but it was possible to eradicate this once deadly disease. So how, I hear you ask, does vaccination work? So, most time, vaccination is done by an injection. Occasionally it can be sniffed in. For example, the flu vaccine is something that you sniff. A dead or inactive pathogen is put into the body. It's not actually the living disease, so it's not going to deliberately give the person that receives it the disease. That would not be very ethical. Ethical means morally acceptable. You should have learnt that word when we were looking at stem cells earlier this year. Now, antibodies are made by the body in response to the presence of antigens within the vaccine. If you look at the diagram on the left, you'll see there are two different antigens, very similar in size, but they have little markers on the outside, a little bit like having different colours of hair or different colours of eyes or freckles on your nose. And each different disease will have a different antigen. Your body will then produce antibodies. These are the blue bits in the diagram, and these have a binding site which is a match for the marker. Yes, an opposite version. It's a bit like a lock and a key. You know, if you've got the wrong key, you will not be able to unlock your front door. It's the same with antibodies and antigens. Your body will need to produce a new antibody for each disease it comes across, because they will all have slightly different antigens. You get a small dose in a vaccine, you produce a small amount of antigens. Antibodies. Told you we had to be careful of those words. Not antigens, antibodies. Your body will produce, your body makes the antibodies. Remember that, bodies for bodies. And they will combat the antigens and get rid of it and protect you from the disease. In the future, your body comes across the pathogen again. The pathogen includes the antigens. Your body says, I recognise that, and I already know how to make the antibodies because I've made them before. We know it's always easier to make something second, third, 10th time after making the original one. So your body is able to quickly produce large amounts of antibodies and eradicate the disease from within you. Little bit of graph time now. I know we all love a graph. Now we've got two different infections here, one shown in red, one shown in blue. The red antigen, the antigen for the red disease, is met by the body after about 1.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks, you get a big response. That's a big bump in the red graph. So it produces lots of antibodies. The level slowly drops down, but when the antigen is then met again at 7 weeks, the body is quickly able to produce a large amount of antibodies, which is why the red graph goes up so high. The antigen B isn't met in the first time. The body comes across it later, and so its graph is slightly behind the one for A. And in fact, what we just have is the first response for B, which is to a similar level as it was to A, but of course if B is then met later on, I'm sure you can work out, you'll get another big bump similar to the secondary anti-A bump. And this is to show you that when your body meets a disease, it won't necessarily just meet one disease at a time. As you get older, your body will have met more and more diseases, will have more and more antibodies going around in small quantities in your blood, and will be able to produce the one that is required quite quickly. And this is what protects you, which is why as an adult you have a stronger immune system than as a child, because as a young child you won't have come across many diseases. Now, vaccination is used against a range of diseases such as tetanus, diphtheria, polio, measles, mumps. Some of these are diseases that are always serious. Some of them are diseases that are sometimes serious, sometimes mild, but you can't predict who's going to get which version. Mostly they're given to young children. You will have heard of people saying, I'm taking my baby to get their injections. Sometimes, if you're going to travel to a country where there are diseases that aren't present in your own country, you will need to have a vaccination or injection against an illness that is present in that country. And sometimes you will need to get a booster injection. For example, if you go to casualty and you've injured yourself on some metal, you'll be asked when you last had a tetanus injection, and they may well give you a booster, an extra dose, to make sure that your body is protected against this disease. Herd immunity is probably a phrase you've heard a lot recently. It's not talking about herds of cows or sheep. A herd is just a large group of individuals of the same species. And if most of a population is immune to a disease, they're not able to get it because they've come across it, they've got antibodies. That is called herd immunity. It can come from an infection, where obviously the people that survive are the ones that will have antibodies and be immune. It can come by immunization, which is the other name for vaccination. Vaccination, immunization mean the same thing. They are synonyms. And if most people are immune, there's not a lot of people left to actually catch the infection and to pass it on to each other. So if you get lots and lots of people that are immune, the disease can disappear. Some diseases, though, will produce antibodies that don't last your whole lifetime. That is why you might need a booster injection. And this is one of the concerns with coronavirus. They're not sure that immunity will be long lasting, or whether it might only last 1 or 2 years. Now, we've got 4 questions here. I've given you marks for each of them. So there's a total of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 marks. Now, little reminder, if a question is in a sentence, your answer needs to be in a sentence. For each mark that a question is worth, gives you an idea of how many minutes it should take to write the answer. Now, if you would like to write out the question as well, it will take you a bit longer. But writing out the question is not essential. You wouldn't copy it out again in an exam, you just write it in the space underneath. You've got 3 shorter questions and 1 longer one. Answers to both of them are coming up on the video. So do not worry, you will be able to check your answers. Obviously you will want to pause the video at this point while you answer the questions, then check them afterwards. So answers are here. An antigen is the part of the pathogen which causes a reaction by the white blood cells. It's the white blood cells that make antibodies. Remember, red blood cells carry oxygen and carbon dioxide around the body. They are dissolved gases and they are exchanged in the lungs and in the tissues. White blood cells are the part of the blood which is involved with immunity. An antibody is produced by a white blood cell to destroy the antigens in a pathogen. Examples of diseases are given below. I'm sorry, but you just need to learn those. Long answer question here. The points I've made need to be in a very similar order for your answer to make sense. Remember, you do get marks for how your answer flows and how sensible it is when you do a longer writing question like this in a test. So it's probably a good idea to write down your key vocabulary first and possibly even write yourself some notes as to which order you're going to use those words. Little bit of fun at the end here. We've got a link to a horrible history song called Good Vaccinations. It's a little bit silly, but hey, no reason we shouldn't have some fun while we're in lockdown. If you've got a study buddy, you might want to ring them and sing it together. And the last thing, very, very important, review of the objectives. Do you know how your immune system works? Do you know how vaccination can protect you against disease? Can you explain the meaning of these 4 key words? What is another word that means the same as vaccination? If you can do all of these, you've done well. If you're unsure about any of them, please go back. You can send me copies of your notes or specifically your long answer question so that I can see how you're doing and see that you've done the work. You also have a task on Seneca learning for this week, and both the Seneca task and this YouTube video have got their links on Go for Schools. So you've got Go for Schools, you've got this video on YouTube, and you will have had an email from me. And you can always email me if you have any more questions. I hope that you're all good for now. Looking forward to seeing your work soon. Bye for now.